The reinforced glass of the African lion exhibit didn't shatter. It exploded inward with a sound like a gunshot. Brutus, a 400-pound mass of muscle and scar tissue, shook blood from his golden mane as he stepped through the wreckage. The security cameras captured what keepers would later call the moment the animal became human. Those amber eyes scanning the empty enclosure where Nala used to pace beside him. 11 years to the day since they took her. The timestamp blinked 3:14 a.m. as Brutus turned toward the perimeter fence, his claws leaving perfect impressions in the concrete. Not the panicked scratches of escape, but the deliberate strokes of a prisoner crossing days off a calendar. When the first tranquilizer dart grazed his shoulder, he didn't even flinch. The night smelled like rain and diesel fuel. Somewhere beyond these walls, Nala's scent still lingered in the Appalachian air. He'd walk through hell to taste it again. Sheriff Dawson traced the crimson trail with his flashlight, the beam trembling in the pre-dawn gloom. Jesus H. Christ, he muttered. The pawprints told a story no wildlife manual could explain. 3 miles of broken fences and torn earth, all leading straight to Blackwell Pharmaceuticals. But it was the marks on the lab's outer wall that made the blood drain from Dawson's face. 5 parallel grooves, 6 feet long, cut deep into the concrete. Exactly like the scars on Nala's back in her medical files. The sheriff's radio crackled as the zoo director's voice broke through static. "You don't understand. He's not running from something. He's running to her." Dawson stared at the security footage on his phone, Brutus pausing mid-escape to stare at Nala's empty exhibit, his massive chest heaving with something that looked suspiciously like human sobs. The timestamp read 3:16 a.m., exactly 11 years since the transfer papers were signed. Old Widow Jenkins nearly spilled her chamomile tea when the sound hit. Not the territorial bellow of a zoo animal. This was the guttural, broken wail of a man who just found his wife's grave disturbed. Sleepy Creek streetlights flickered as Brutus emerged from the tree line, his flanks streaked with blood and motor oil. The McCready boys reached for their hunting rifles, but froze when the lion turned those ancient eyes on them. There was no animal madness there, only cold, calculating purpose. The 911 calls would later describe how he moved not with a predator's lope, but with the methodical stride of a soldier advancing on an objective. When the wind shifted, carrying the stench of antiseptic from Blackwell's vents, Brutus's nostrils flared. A sound escaped his throat that made old Jed Carter cross himself. The exact same noise he'd made watching medics load his Betty into the ambulance that last morning. The lion wasn't hunting. He was grieving. Floyd Miller's 12-gauge felt suddenly inadequate as the lion materialized from the cornfield like a specter. Moonlight glinted off the fresh scars crisscrossing Brutus's shoulders, the same pattern as the surgical diagrams in Nala's confiscated files. "Back! Get back!" Floyd cocked the shotgun, his voice cracking. Brutus paused, those yellow eyes reflecting the dying light. For one terrifying second, Floyd saw something no animal should possess: recognition. Then the wind carried the distant whine of Blackwell's ventilation system, and the lion's entire body tensed. The blast from Floyd's gun went wide, spraying buckshot through the stalks. Brutus didn't even blink, just turned those burning eyes west and resumed his march, leaving the farmers standing in shocked silence. "Granddaddy?" Little Tommy whispered, pointing at the blood pooling between the rows. The droplets formed a perfect shape, a lioness's profile, complete with Nala's distinctive notch in the left ear. Floyd Miller hadn't prayed since Korea. The retired zookeeper's pickup skidded to a halt in a shower of gravel, its door groaning like the man who emerged. 73-year-old Arthur Thompson hadn't run since Martha's funeral, but tonight he sprinted toward the armed mob with his cane raised high. "You're shooting at a widower," he wheezed, placing himself between Brutus and 12 cocked rifles. The effect was instantaneous. The lion froze, nostrils flaring at the familiar scent of Bengay and peppermint. 20 years dissolved in an instant. There were the hands that had bottle-fed him through pneumonia winters, the voice that had talked him down from his first panic attack during a thunderstorm. Cameras flashed as Brutus lowered his massive head and licked Arthur's wrinkled cheek, a gesture reserved for Nala in their private moments. "He's come for her," Arthur whispered, stroking the battle-scarred mane. "Just like I would have for Martha." In that moment, every hunter lowered their weapon, remembering their own lost loves. All except one. Smartphones captured the impossible. 400 pounds of apex predator curled at Arthur's feet like an overgrown house cat. Brutus nuzzled the old man's chest, inhaling the same wool sweater sent from their mornings, watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom together. When Arthur's trembling fingers found that distinctive notch in the lion's left ear, the one from the cubhood fence incident, Brutus released a sound that shattered every zoology textbook. Not a roar, a whimper. The video went viral before dawn. Hashtag Lion Remembers trending globally with one frame frozen on millions of screens. Those amber eyes blinking slowly, the way house cats do when they trust you with their life. "He's asking for help," Arthur told the stunned crowd, reading the silent plea only he could understand. "They're hurting his Nala." Then Brutus did what no wild animal should comprehend. He nodded toward Blackwell's glowing towers, and the world finally understood. This wasn't an escape. The security footage leaked by a Blackwell whistleblower showed the unthinkable. Nala, once the National Zoo's star attraction, now lay shaved and shackled to a steel table, her ribs protruding like prison bars. Dr. Luther's voiceover made jurors vomit. Subject 34's pain threshold exceeds expectations. Note the vocalization when we inject the neuromuscular agent. The camera zoomed in on Nala's face as the needle plunged. Not a snarl, a whimper, exactly like Brutus's when Arthur found him as a cub with a porcupine quill in his paw. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m., same as Brutus's breakout. But the most damning frame came at 3:16, a split second where the camera caught Luther's monitor playing footage of Brutus in his exhibit. "He made her watch," the prosecutor would later say. "While they made him hear." The video ended with Nala's weak attempt to roar her mate's name, a sound that still echoed through the ventilation shafts Brutus now crawled through. The red fox materialized from the underbrush as Brutus drank from Cedar Creek, her coat matted with lab filth. "They've scheduled her final dissection for dawn," Vixen yipped, dropping a stolen surgical schedule at his paws. Blood stained the termination authorization line where Dr. Luther had signed with a flourish. Brutus's growl sent ripples across the moonlit water. He remembered this fox, the one who'd smuggled Nala's tufts of fur through the lab's vents these past years. Vixen nuzzled his wounded leg. "She still sings your name when the drugs wear off." As Brutus turned toward Blackwell's glowing towers, the fox added one last warning. "The silver needle's poison works fast. You'll have 3 minutes. Maybe less." The lion's answering roar shook the forest silent. Somewhere in room 7, Nala's ears pricked up at the sound she thought she'd never hear again. Ace had watched from the pines for weeks, seen the horrors through Blackwell skylights. Now the red-tailed hawk folded his wings and became a feathered missile. At precisely 4:03 a.m., he struck the security camera with the precision of a sniper, talons shredding wires in a shower of sparks. Guards shouted as Brutus surged through the resulting blind spot. Ace's broken body tumbled, but not before executing his final maneuver, a wing beat that triggered the motion-sensitive sprinklers. The water masked Brutus's approach, just as they'd planned during their silent communion at the forest's edge. As the lion's claws found purchase on the roof, Ace's dying screech seemed to say, "Tell Nala, her sky warrior, kept watch." The security footage would later show something impossible, the hawk turning mid-fall to ensure Brutus made it inside before closing his eyes forever. The Capuchin's tiny hands trembled as he swung through Blackwell's air ducts, his fur still bearing the scars of last year's aggression studies. Below, in operating room 3, Dr. Luther prepped the lethal injection while humming Beethoven. Jasper waited until the doctor bent over Nala's sedated form, then struck. Luther screamed as the monkey's urine streamed onto his bald head. In the chaos, Jasper snatched the keyring, his heart pounding like it had when they shocked his mother to death in this very room. The crash of metal on tile was deliberate. Brutus needed to hear. As the lion's massive head whipped toward the sound, Jasper did what no lab animal should. He flipped the fire alarm, then scampered to Nala's side. His tiny fingers worked at her restraints with practiced ease. They'd practiced this moment for years, passing lock-picking techniques through cage bars when the humans weren't looking. Now, as Brutus burst through the door, Jasper whispered the words Nala had taught him. "Your king has come." The grizzly's roar shook the laboratory walls as 800 pounds of muscle and memory exploded from cage D42. Bernard hadn't forgotten the day they took his cubs. The needles, the cold steel table, the empty cages. Now his massive paws slammed into the security gate with the force of a freight train. Each impact timed perfectly with Brutus's advance. Glass shattered as the bear systematically destroyed every lock he could reach. When the tranquilizer dart finally pierced his thick hide, Bernard collapsed against Nala's empty transport crate, his final breath fogging the metal where her scent still lingered. The security footage would later show the impossible. In his last moment, the grizzly turned toward operating room 3 and nodded once. A father's blessing for another father's quest. The German shepherd's teeth closed around his handler's wrist with surgical precision. Rex had watched through the fence for 3 years as Nala comforted his puppies during thunderstorms, singing to them in that deep lioness no human could hear. Now he body-slammed the security chief into a bank of monitors, his growl conveying what every dog knows in its soul. Family isn't defined by species. As Brutus leapt over the fallen man, Rex delivered his final gift, Luther's keycard clutched gently between his teeth. The shepherd's tail thumped weakly as Brutus nuzzled him in thanks. 2 natural enemies united by love for the same broken lioness. Outside, Arthur cradled Rex's head in his lap, humming the same lullaby Nala used to sing to the pups. The dog's last breath came with a contented sigh, his eyes fixed on the operating room door. The crumpled Polaroid trembled in Arthur's hands as he addressed the gathering authorities. Brutus carried this in his mouth for 11 years, he whispered. The image showed Nala in her prime, those golden eyes staring straight at the camera with undisguised devotion. The back bore a handwritten date and a single word, always. Arthur's voice broke as he pointed to the fresh bloodstain obscuring Nala's face. He didn't break out when they hurt him. He broke out when they started hurting her again last month. Sheriff Dawson swallowed hard, studying the photo's edges where Brutus's teeth marks had worn through the paper from constant carrying. The deepest grooves traced Nala's outline like a lover's caress, and the sheriff suddenly understood. This wasn't animal behavior. This was a husband fighting for his wife. The courtroom fell deathly silent as the audio played. Nala's agonized roars transitioned into something far more terrible. The exact same keening wail Brutus had made as a cub when separated from Arthur during thunderstorms. Remarkable, Luther's voice noted clinically. The vocalization pattern matches human grief responses. Proceed with the adrenal extraction. A juror vomited when the video revealed why Brutus had torn apart his exhibit. They'd installed speakers piping Nala's tortured cries into his enclosure every night for stress response studies. The judge had to recess when Arthur lunged at Luther, screaming, "You made him listen to his wife die every night for 11 years. In the chaos, no one noticed Brutus's reaction. The way his massive body curled protectively around Arthur, just as Nala used to shield him from fireworks. The smell hit Brutus like a physical blow. Eucalyptus shampoo mixed with blood and fear. The same shampoo Arthur had used to bathe them both as cubs. His massive head swung toward operating room 3, nostrils flaring at the metallic tang of fresh surgical steel. Down the hallway, Dr. Luther froze mid-incision as a sound he'd only heard on recordings shook the walls. The full-throated hunting roar of a lion who'd finally found what he was searching for. Nala's drugged eyes flew open as the door exploded inward. For the first time in 11 years, her cracked, overgrown claws extended in something other than pain. They reached for her king. The monitors flatlined as her heart, against all medical logic, began beating stronger. Brutus's claws left permanent grooves in the reinforced steel as he wrenched it from its hinges. The stench that poured out stopped even his mighty heart. Row after row of cages containing animals with fresh surgical scars and hollow eyes. But it was the far wall that made Arthur collapse to his knees. Hundreds of labeled jars gleamed under fluorescent lights. D19, lioness, ovarian tissue. B7, bear cub claws. Complete set. R42, German shepherd vocal cords. Brutus's roar shook dust from the ceiling as he found Nala's section 11 jars dated annually, each containing a tuft of golden fur. The final one, prepared that morning, sat empty beside a label, S34, heart, complete. The lion's reaction wasn't rage. It was the sound of a soul breaking. The surgical table rattled as Nala weakly lifted her head, her once glorious mane shaved to patchy stubble. Brutus approached slowly, whimpering at the 4 lines protruding from her legs. When their noses finally touched, the lioness released a sound no textbook could explain. A purr so deep it vibrated the steel instruments. Then her body went rigid. Luther's syringe glinted in the corner, still dripping clear liquid. Brutus's anguished cry brought Arthur running. But it was Rex who acted. The dying German shepherd dragged the antidote from Luther's pocket across the bloody floor with his last ounce of strength. As the world held its breath, Nala's chest rose once, twice, then settled into steady rhythm against Brutus's flank. The first thing she did? Lick the tears from her mate's face. The mad scientist's laughter echoed off stainless steel as he raised the second syringe. You'll never make it to the antidote in time. Brutus moved faster than anything that size should, but it was Arthur who intercepted Luther's lunge. The old zookeeper's cane cracked across Luther's wrist with a sickening snap, sending the lethal dose skittering into a drain. "That's for Martha," Arthur whispered, referencing the wife he'd lost to cancer. The same disease Luther had been studying in Nala. As police swarmed the room, Brutus did something that would haunt the officers forever. He carefully gathered Arthur into his front paws like a cub, shielding him from the flashing lights and shouts. The old man's tears soaked into battle-scarred fur as he whispered, "I've got you, son, just like always." The courtroom sketch artist's hand shook as she captured the moment, 400 pounds of muscle and fury pinning Dr. Luther to the operating table. Brutus's hot breath fogged the stainless steel as his teeth hovered over the doctor's throat. Every law of nature demanded vengeance. Every scar on Nala's body cried for justice. Then a weak mule came from the doorway. Nala, supported by Rex and Jasper, watching with exhausted eyes. Brutus's jaws relaxed. With deliberate slowness, he dragged his tongue up Luther's face in the ultimate feline insult, a gesture reserved for worthless cubs. The message was clear: you're not worth killing. As officers hauled Luther away, Brutus returned to Nala's side, gently grooming her patchy fur while Jasper picked at her 4 lines with tiny, careful fingers. The explosion rocked Sleepy Creek at dawn. Arthur watched from a safe distance as Blackwell Pharmaceuticals became an inferno, his arm buried elbow-deep in Brutus's mane. The lion hadn't moved for hours, his eyes reflecting the flames that consumed Nala's prison. No one asked how the fire started, though Sheriff Dawson would later note the distinct smell of bear urine on the broken accelerant containers. As the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks, Nala lifted her scarred muzzle and released a sound no one had heard in 11 years, the full-throated victory roar of a lioness reunited with her pride. Brutus answered, their voices weaving through the smoke in a harmony that made even the toughest deputies wipe their eyes. Somewhere in the ashes, 11 years of pain records dissolved into nothingness. And in the forest beyond, a single red fox watched the flames dance in her golden eyes. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Appalachian foothills as Brutus led his battered family away from the smoldering ruins. Nala leaned heavily against his flank, her once powerful legs trembling with each step, while Arthur limped beside them, his gnarled fingers buried in Brutus's mane. The old zookeeper's breath hitched when they reached the tree line. Beyond lay uncharted wilderness, a world neither lion had known since cubhood. Brutus paused, turning to nuzzle Arthur's tear-streaked face. The unspoken question hung between them. Arthur swallowed hard, then did something that would become legend. He unbuckled his weathered leather belt, the one with HT, tooled into the grain, and fastened it loosely around Brutus's neck. "Go on, son," he whispered, voice breaking. "She needs you more." The security cameras at the national park would later capture the astonishing image: two African lions and an old man walking into the autumn woods together, their shadows merging into one. The cave smelled of damp earth and wild thyme, its walls still warm from the afternoon sun. Nala collapsed onto the soft bracken, her breathing shallow but steady. Brutus worked methodically, using his teeth to gently remove her remaining 4 lines, while Arthur built a fire with shaking hands. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the trio in fleeting stars. When Nala's fever spiked that night, it was Brutus who pressed his massive body against her shivering form, the same way she'd warmed him during their first zoo winter. Arthur watched through bleary eyes as the lion began to groom Nala's patchy fur with meticulous care, his rough tongue stimulating circulation just as the keepers had taught him decades ago. Somewhere around 3 a.m., when the fire burned lowest, Nala's paw found Brutus's. Their claws intertwined like the roots of the old oak outside, and for the first time in 11 years, both lions slept without nightmares. The buck never saw death coming. Brutus moved through the winter forest like a ghost, his muscles remembering rhythms encoded in his DNA but suppressed for decades. The kill was clean, one powerful swipe to the spine, just as Nala had taught their cubs long ago. What happened next would baffle wildlife biologists. Instead of eating, Brutus dragged the 200-pound carcass nearly a mile back to the cave. Nala's weak purr as she tore into the fresh venison made his ears twitch with satisfaction. Arthur, gnawing on a haunch nearby, suddenly understood. This wasn't just food. It was Brutus reclaiming his role as provider, as mate, as king. The old man's chuckle startled a nearby raven. "Atta boy," he murmured, scratching between Brutus's shoulder blades where Nala used to groom him. That night, under a full moon, Brutus stood guard at the cave entrance, his silhouette a perfect replica of the lion statues at the zoo gates. Only now he was no captive. The wind carried his scent through the valley, a declaration to the wilderness. The king had returned. The blizzard howled like a living thing, its icy fingers probing every crevice of the mountain. Arthur woke to numbness in his left side, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Brutus sensed it first, the change in the old man's heartbeat, the unnatural heat radiating from his papery skin. What followed was a ballet of desperation. Nala blocking the cave entrance with her body while Brutus piled every dry leaf and tuft of fur around Arthur's shivering form. When the old man's breathing grew ragged, Brutus did something no wild lion should comprehend. He pressed his massive chest against Arthur's back, using his own heartbeat as a metronome to steady the failing rhythm. Nala curled around them both, her purr vibrating through Arthur's bones like a healing chant. Somewhere in that endless night, between the pain and the warmth, Arthur realized the truth. These magnificent creatures were fighting for him with the same ferocity they'd shown each other. Dawn found the trio buried under a drift, alive and improbably whole, their breaths rising in synchronized clouds. The storm had passed. Their family had not. The mountain stream ran clear and cold with the first meltwater when Nala's secret became impossible to hide. Brutus noticed first the subtle rounding of her belly, the way she turned her nose up at perfectly good rabbit. His reaction stunned Arthur. Instead of the expected confusion, the lion began bringing Nala special treats, the tenderest cuts of meat, certain medicinal herbs even the local rangers couldn't identify. It was the old Shawnee caretaker at the national park who confirmed what Arthur dared not hope. "That lioness carries life," he murmured, watching Nala bask in a sunbeam. "Nature finds a way, even after all they done to her." That night, as fireflies dotted the forest, Brutus groomed Nala's swelling belly with extraordinary gentleness, his tongue pausing where tiny kicks fluttered beneath her skin. Arthur, whittling a crib from cedar wood, smiled through tears. Somewhere in the darkness, a red fox left a freshly killed grouse at the cave entrance. The forest was preparing for new royalty. Nala's screams brought Brutus pacing at the cave mouth, his claws scoring deep grooves in the stone. Arthur, acting on half-remembered veterinary training, murmured encouragement as the lioness strained. When the first cub emerged, a squirming, golden bundle with Brutus's eyes and Nala's star-shaped forehead marking. The old man's hands shook as he cleared its airways. 2 more followed, each stronger than the last. Brutus's reaction would become wilderness legend. Instead of the typical male lion's indifference, he gathered each cub in his massive jaws with terrifying gentleness, cleaning them with a precision that spoke of deep memory. Nala watched through exhausted eyes as her mate arranged their squeaking offspring along her belly, his massive head bending to lick her face in awed gratitude. Arthur, leaning against the cave wall, suddenly understood the jars in Luther's lab. Nala's stolen cubs had never stopped existing in Brutus's heart. Now, as dawn painted the newborns in liquid gold, the old zookeeper whispered the names he'd carried for 20 years. Samson, Delilah, and little Moses. Outside, the forest held its breath. The pride was whole at last. The clearing became an arena of wonder that spring morning. Samson, the boldest cub, tumbled after dragonflies while delicate Delilah studied her reflection in a rain puddle. Moses, smallest but brightest, had already discovered Arthur's shoelaces. Brutus watched from a sun-warmed rock, his tail flicking in contentment, while Nala kept vigilant guard nearby. When Samson ventured too close to the drop-off, it wasn't Nala who intervened. Brutus moved like lightning, catching the cub by his scruff and delivering a gentle corrective swat. Arthur's chuckle carried across the meadow. Just like you with the porcupine, eh boy? The old man didn't see the shadow at first, the park ranger's binoculars glinting from the ridge. By the time Brutus's warning growl sounded, the human had vanished. But the camera left behind would tell its own story. 3 cubs tumbling over their legendary father, their squeaks of joy echoing through the valley. That evening, as fireflies danced, Nala nuzzled Arthur's hand, her silent question clear. The old man sighed. Yeah, darlin', the world's gonna come lookin' now. The helicopters arrived at dawn, their rotors scattering autumn leaves like frightened birds. Brutus herded his family into the cave's deepest recesses, his roars shaking loose pebbles from the ceiling. Arthur, leaning heavily on his cane, stepped into the blinding lights alone. The reporters' questions came in a cacophony. How did they survive? Are the cubs hybrids? What about the lawsuits? The old zookeeper waited for silence. When it came, his voice carried the weight of mountains. Y'all forgot something basic, he said, stroking Moses' head where the cub peeked from his coat. Love ain't just a human thing. The broadcast went viral. Not for the sensationalism, but for the moment Brutus emerged to stand beside Arthur, his scarred flank brushing the old man's legs. Or when Nala, once the most photographed lioness in America, deliberately stepped between her cubs and the cameras. But the image that broke the internet? Delilah batting curiously at a reporter's microphone, her tiny roar a perfect echo of her mother's famous call. By sundown, the world was divided: exploit or protect. Only the Shawnee caretaker noticed the shadow moving through the treeline. Luther's men had come calling. The tranquilizer dart whizzed past Arthur's ear, embedding itself in the cave wall. Brutus's reaction was instantaneous, a roar that sent the cubs scrambling behind Nala as he positioned himself in the entrance. The mercenaries, because that's what Luther's research team really were, hadn't counted on 3 things: Arthur's veteran instincts, Nala's tactical brilliance, or the forest itself rising to defend its kings. Vixen's warning yips echoed through the trees as the first man screamed, his ankle caught in a beaver trap. Bernard's massive offspring, because of course the grizzly had descendants, charged from the underbrush, sending 2 more fleeing. But it was Brutus who delivered the coup de grace, herding the lead mercenary toward the unstable cliff edge with terrifying precision. The man's whimpers turned to sobs when he realized the lion wasn't killing him. He was offering a choice: jump or face human justice. The splash far below signaled Brutus's mercy. At dawn, the cubs played with a discarded helmet, unaware how close darkness had come. Nala's eyes, though, held a new wariness. The peace was over. The first frost came early that year, painting the cave's entrance in delicate crystals. Arthur felt it in his bones. The familiar ache that meant his time was winding down. Brutus sensed it too, bringing him the softest kills and sleeping pressed against his back for warmth. On the morning of November 7th, the old zookeeper didn't rise with the sun. The lions gathered around him, Brutus chuffing softly, Nala licking his wrinkled hands, the cubs nuzzling his still chest. It was Moses who discovered the note tucked in Arthur's coat, written in shaky script. "Don't mourn me, you glorious beasts. I got 20 extra years with the best family a man could ask for. Brutus, that belt's yours now. Nala, keep him out of trouble. Cubs, listen to your mama. P.S. Tell that red fox her grouse was terrible." The funeral pyre burned bright against the twilight, its smoke carrying Arthur's scent over the territory he'd helped them claim. That night, and every night after, Brutus could be seen silhouetted on the highest ridge, keeping watch over his pride. His scars gleaming in the moonlight, Arthur's belt still draped around his neck. The king had become legend. The legend had become eternal. Word spread like wildfire through the Appalachian towns, whispers of a ghostly pride roaming the high valleys. By spring, the backroads clogged with SUVs bearing license plates from every state, all hoping for a glimpse of the miracle lions. Brutus kept his family deep in the protected hollows, but on one golden afternoon, little Delilah broke protocol. The crowd at Overlook Point gasped as the curious cub pranced along the cliff edge, her golden fur glowing in the sunset. A child's laughter rang out, and in that moment, Nala made her choice. She stepped into full view, head held high like the queen she was, Brutus materializing beside her like a shadow given form. The photographs captured something transcendent, wildness and wisdom intertwined. That night, the park superintendent received 17,000 emails demanding permanent protection for Arthur's pride. The poachers came armed with night vision and silenced rifles, but they hadn't counted on the forest's allegiance. Brutus caught their scent 3 miles out, the stink of greed and gun oil. What followed wasn't a hunt. It was an orchestrated annihilation. Nala herded the cubs to the granite shelter while Brutus and Bernard's massive son flanked the intruders. Vixen's warning barks echoed through the pines as the lions attacked with military precision. The lone survivor would later tell authorities about the eyes, how Brutus's burned with human-like intelligence when he spared him. "Take this message," the park ranger translated from the man's babbling. "Next time, we keep no witnesses." By dawn, a stack of confiscated rifles sat neatly piled at the park entrance, a single lion hair resting atop the heap. The Shawnee elder appeared at first light, his deerskin pouch smelling of sage and something older. Brutus watched intently as the old man sang over Nala's surgical scars, his gnarled hands never trembling despite the lethal proximity. When he produced Arthur's favorite harmonica lost weeks prior, the lions didn't growl. They listened. The elder's prophecy would later be debated by linguists, but the park staff swore they saw Brutus dip his head in understanding when the words were spoken. "The two-legged walks with you now. His song is the wind through your manes." As the healer departed, he left something astonishing, a faded photograph from 1972 showing a young Arthur volunteering at a wildlife sanctuary, bottle-feeding a tiny lion cub with a familiar star-shaped mark. The circle had always been complete. Winter's first blizzard transformed the valley into a testing ground. Samson, now nearly his father's size, struggled to drag an elk carcass up the frozen slope until Brutus demonstrated the proper shoulder technique, just as Nala had taught him decades prior. Delilah discovered her voice that night, her adolescent roar startling a nearby wolf pack into retreat. But it was little Moses who shocked them all, using a fallen branch to bridge a treacherous ice floe, his intelligent eyes gleaming with Arthur's cunning. As the family huddled for warmth in their snow-dusted cave, Brutus groomed each cub with deliberate care. His tongue lingered on their unique markings: Samson's powerful shoulders, Delilah's delicate facial stripes, Moses's odd white-tipped tail. The message was clear: these were no ordinary lions. The world would learn that soon enough. The National Geographic team expected hostility. What they got rewrote conservation science. Over 3 extraordinary days, Brutus permitted limited access, even nudging the cubs toward the camera's lens. The resulting cover image, Nala nuzzling Moses beneath Arthur's weathered belt, which Brutus still wore, sparked international outrage over animal testing. But the true miracle came in the footage no one anticipated. Brutus carefully retrieving a dropped lens cap in his teeth and returning it to the trembling photographer. The video's most paused moment? When the lion's eyes flickered to the man's wedding ring and softened in recognition. By year's end, Arthur's law banned big cat experimentation in 37 states. Luther, watching from prison, reportedly tore the magazine to shreds. The warden noted he missed the back page, where a certain red fox was photographed curled around Delilah's paws. Spring thaw revealed an astonishing sight: Brutus leading his family across the frozen river toward the protected highlands. Nala shepherded the now adolescent cubs while a most unexpected escort flanked them. Bernard's 2 grown offspring and a pack of German shepherds descended from Rex. The trail cameras captured their procession like something from a forgotten age, predators and prey animals alike pausing to watch the legendary pride pass. When they reached the high meadows, Brutus did something that baffled researchers. He buried Arthur's harmonica beneath a lightning-struck oak, then roared so powerfully it dislodged an avalanche. The message was unmistakable: this land was theirs now. By summer's end, the cubs had treed 3 poachers, protected a hiker from a bear, and become local legends in their own right. The park rangers simply posted signs: "Caution! Royalty at play." The full moon painted the valley silver when Nala first heard the ghostly roar. Brutus stood rigid at the cave entrance, his nostrils flaring at the impossible scent: African savanna dust and zoo disinfectant. The figure that emerged from the treeline made Moses yelp in surprise. A scarred, elderly lioness with Nala's distinctive ear notch but graying muzzle. The recognition between the 2 females lasted only an instant before they were grooming each other's faces with frantic joy. Brutus watched in stunned silence as his long-lost sister, presumed dead for 15 years, collapsed exhausted at his paws. Her tracking collar told the story: a 300-mile journey from a defunct roadside zoo. As dawn broke, the pride made space in their den for the prodigal aunt. That afternoon, Samson proudly presented her with a freshly killed rabbit, his mane already thickening into his father's majestic crown. Hurricane Opal's wrath exposed the valley's bones. As 100-mile winds shredded the forest, Brutus herded his family to the one place Arthur had shown him, an ancient limestone cavern even the park maps didn't show. The floodwaters rose faster than expected, trapping Delilah on a shrinking island of rock. What happened next became Appalachian folklore. Nala plunging into the torrent without hesitation, her powerful strokes cutting through debris, while Brutus anchored them both with teeth clamped on her tail. When they collapsed on the far bank, the entire pride piled atop them in a living blanket. The storm passed by morning, revealing an astonishing sight. The German shepherds had somehow led Bernard's family to the same shelter. As the lions and bears groomed each other's wounds, the park's lone wildlife biologist fainted. His recovered notes read simply: "Today, I witnessed the impossible. Today, I saw family." The hiker's cry for help echoed through the canyon at high noon. Moses heard it first, his ears, always attuned to human distress thanks to Arthur, swiveling like radar dishes. What the lost family encountered when they rounded the bend would become national news. 3 massive lions standing guard over their injured son, with Delilah carefully licking the boy's bleeding knee clean. The security footage, because of course someone was filming, showed Samson actually herding the panicked parents closer, while Moses retrieved the dropped first aid kit in his teeth. When park rangers arrived, they found the teen wrapped in Brutus's still warm paw prints, his fever miraculously broken. The family's statement said it all. They didn't just save him, they loved him. That winter, the pride began leaving gifts at ranger stations, usually confiscated poacher gear or healed injured animals. The accompanying lion tracks always led back to Arthur's Oak. The blizzard of '99 should have killed them. Instead, it birthed a legend. Trapped researchers watched in awe as Brutus, now gray-muzzled but still formidable, led his multi-species family to an abandoned ranger cabin. What happened inside defied explanation. Nala tearing open supply boxes with surgical precision, Moses starting a fire by knocking sparks from the hearth, Delilah distributing blankets to the shivering foxes and bear cubs. When morning came, the snowdrifts revealed an astonishing sight: perfect lion, bear, and canine prints leading away in unison. The final photograph showed Brutus looking back, Arthur's belt still around his neck, his eyes holding all the wisdom of their shared journey. That spring, the first of Samson's cubs was born with a peculiar marking, a white star between its shoulders, just like the old zookeeper's birthmark. The park superintendent, hanging Arthur's harmonica in the visitor center, murmured what everyone knew: he never really left. And if you listen closely on quiet evenings, snow settled on Brutus's scarred muzzle like diamond dust. He moved slower now, his roar a raspy echo of its former thunder. But his eyes, amber beacons in the creased face, still tracked every rustle in the valley. One frigid dawn, Moses found him atop Arthur's ridge, gazing east where zoo lights once glittered. The old lion nuzzled his son's star-marked forehead, then vanished into the pines. He returned at dusk dragging an elk, his final gift. That night, the cubs slept piled against his heaving ribs, warmed by the furnace of a fading king. She slipped away in April's gentlest rain. Brutus found her beneath the lightning-struck oak, head resting on Arthur's harmonica. No struggle, no sound, just peace smoothing her scarred face. The pride gathered. Brutus licking her still paws, Samson roaring grief into the wind, Delilah arranging wildflowers in her mother's mane. At dawn, they buried her with Arthur's belt. Brutus didn't eat for 3 days. He just guarded the mound, swatting rain-soaked butterflies away from her grave. On the 4th morning, hunters reported ghostly duets, a lion's rasp harmonizing with a bluesy sigh from the soil. Moses inherited Arthur's eyes and his duty. While Samson ruled the high meadows, the cleverest cub patrolled human edges. Hikers told of a lion blocking trails near cliffs, herding lost children toward ranger cabins. When loggers threatened Arthur's oak, Moses appeared with Bernard's grandson, felling trees himself with strategic claw swipes. His masterpiece, trapping poachers in their own nets, then sitting atop their truck until rangers arrived. "He's not a lion," insisted one freed hostage. "He's a bearded man in a fur coat." Moses's retort, leaving the man's stolen wallet on the sheriff's desk. The mountain lions came courting, majestic, wild-born. Delilah sent them packing. Instead, she vanished for 3 moons, returning with him, a scarred German shepherd mix, limping but regal. Brutus sniffed the dog's war-torn ears and rumbled approval. Their den birthed revolution. Tawny cubs with floppy ears who hunted like lions and retrieved sticks like collies. Samson disowned her. Brutus just watched, amused, as hybrid pups treed trespassers with military precision. When photographers came, Delilah posed her mutt prints beneath Arthur's oak. The caption wrote itself, "Royalty redefined." Poachers targeted Moses's hybrid pups. Samson intercepted them at the pass. What ensued became ballad-worthy. The giant lion charging ATVs, flipping one with a swipe of paws the size of dinner plates. Bullets grazed his flank, but he fought like his father's ghost possessed him. When rangers arrived, Samson lay panting atop 6 unconscious men, Delilah's pups nuzzling his bloodied mane. He refused treatment, limping instead to Brutus's side. The old lion rose stiffly, licking his son's wounds as snow began to fall. Samson's reign had begun. Brutus's ended that night. Brutus walked into the blizzard alone. They found him at Arthur's ridge, curled around the harmonica, snow frosting his still mane. No wounds, no struggle. He'd simply stopped. The pride dug through ice to bury him beside Nala. As shovels struck wood, gasps erupted. Arthur's belt, perfectly preserved, coiled around both graves. Moses placed the harmonica between them. That evening, hikers swore they heard 3 roars echo, one young, one female, one raspy with age, before dissolving into Danny Boy played on a blues harp. The ranger's logbook entry, silence fell. Even the wind mourned. The elder returned at solstice. He didn't speak to rangers, just laid tobacco at the twin graves. As he turned, Samson blocked his path. The giant lion dropped a gift. Luther's prison ID, stolen from a warden's wallet. The Shawnee man smiled. "The two-legged walks with you," he murmured. "His song is the wind." Suddenly, harmonica notes swirled through pines. No source, just sound. Samson roared. Moses howled. Delilah's dogs bayed. When the music ceased, the graves bore fresh markings. Paw prints and boot prints overlapping. The elder vanished. So did Luther's ID. Arthur's oak became a shrine. Not for lions, for family. Visitors left odd offerings. Dog toys, harmonica reeds, veteran caps. One morning, a wheelchair-bound Vietnam vet scattered his brother's ashes there. Samson watched from the ridge, then descended. The crowd froze as 500 pounds of lion nudged the vet's hand, licking salt tears before placing a freshly killed rabbit at the wheelchair's foot. Photos broke the internet. #WarriorRespect. By dusk, veterans nationwide were mailing medals to Pride Rock, Appalachia. Rangers built a cedar box to hold them all. Samson slept atop it nightly. Delilah's last litter brought the miracle. One squirming cub bore a white star between its shoulders, Arthur's birthmark. Moses refused to leave its side. When Samson approached, the cub toddled forward and batted the alpha's nose. Instead of rage, Samson flopped belly up. Rangers named him Artie. He grew up riding German shepherds, stealing ranger hats, and digging up harmonica reeds near the graves. At his first roar, old-timers wept. It held Brutus's timbre, Nala's melody, and Arthur's wheezy chuckle. The Shawnee elder sent one word: homecoming. Artie led his first hunt at dawn, Samson and Moses flanking him like living shadows. As they vanished into mist, a harmonica sighed from the oak. Tourists snapped pictures. Rangers just smiled. They knew the truth. Brutus in Artie's star-marked swagger, Nala in Delilah's protective snarl, Arthur in Moses's clever eyes. Up on the ridge, 3 graves lay adorned with fresh bear fur and German shepherd tags. The wind carried phantom roars, bluesy notes, and the creak of a rocking chair. In Appalachia, they say love outlives memory. Here, it outruns time itself.